Awesome. Looks like we're just waiting on Mel.
Great.
I hope it's beautiful where you guys are today. It's woke up for the first time in a couple days feeling like spring, actually.
Very nice.
It's weird here in Baltimore. It's like one day it's raining and one day it's, spring.
Yeah, for sure.
Same.
Oh, awesome. Mel.
Today is nice. Yeah.
Great. Oof.
Thank you all for cooperating with all of the lovely technical stuff as we literally all figure it out together.
It's fun. It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think we're all like, we've learned all these new behaviors. I don't think we're going to go back to a lot of things that we used to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Some
Just
things
making
actually
a
work better.
conference call using phone is like antiquated now, right?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Morning, everyone. My name is Paige Gross. I'm the lead reporter at Technically Philly. So you've been seeing a couple of my colleagues throughout the day, and we have here with us a collection of companies from the markets that we cover. So I just introduced myself. We're actually going to throw up a poll that is relevant to today's conversation, which is how to be responsive during your workforce during a crisis. So we kind of want to get, we have about 180 people on right now watching. So we're going to throw up this poll. What are some tactics that you or your organization have taken to be more responsive during this time while we, fight the COVID-19 pandemic? So while we throw up this poll, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. So we'll start with Lloyd. How's it going, Lloyd?
Good morning. Yeah, it's going great. So as we were just saying, it's a beautiful day here in the South Jersey area, right outside of Philly, and really happy to be here today. So my name's Lloyd Adams, and I am the Managing Director of the East Region for SAP here in North America. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, but been with SAP for almost 22 years, most of it here in the greater Philadelphia area. So I manage all of our customer-facing teams here in the region. So hopefully a number of you are out there in the audience today, and you're really excited to be part of today's such an important topic, obviously, and one we continue to learn from each other. So really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Mel, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm actually making this appearance from my home in Delaware.
Awesome.
In Philadelphia. I'm the head of HR for our technology product and experience team at Comcast. And I've been there, I guess I'm going on 25 years now. So my first pandemic, obviously with all of us, but just thrilled to join all of you today.
Well, thanks for being here. Lindsay, I think you're muted, but how's it going?
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Lindsay Noble. I'm head of people at Clutch. We're based in Washington, D.C. And yeah, excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me and pulling this together so quickly. I think everyone's been pivoting lately. So I was impressed to see how quickly this all came together.
Thank you. And Jacob, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Jake Hsu. I'm the CEO of Catalyte here in Baltimore, Maryland. And yeah, I've been here for about 4 years now. I'm a transplant from Silicon Valley. And what Catalyte does is we're essentially helping people, finding people from all walks of life, regardless of background, education, and experience. And we retrain them to become some of the highest performing software engineers in the business.
Got it. Well, thank you all for being here. Something that we have been covering a lot is just how does one respond to this pandemic? I mean, it's not something that we maybe ever thought we would be facing in our business lives, in our lives at all. So a lot of, how we deal with this is communication. So what is something that initially, when, talks of how the pandemic was going to start affecting our work lives, what was the first thing that, the first tool or first, communication tactic you decided to use to kind of start talking to your teams about how this was going to affect, our business lives? And Lindsay, I know that you are, your core is people, so I'm going to throw this to you first. So yeah, what was your first thoughts? And as in human resources, you've had a long career in it. So, what prepares you for a pandemic?
Sure, right. I think we were all, all kind of first time in this. Luckily, I think with our company, it's a very collaborative group. So we had a lot of structure already in place for communication. So all team weekly meetings with our CEO, which include business updates and company updates. So every Monday morning, we have a great structure with each of our functional areas with having weekly meetings. Our managers have weekly one-on-ones, the majority of them. Many have, a few, I think, we've pivoted a little bit, but several were having, morning huddles with their teams. And then also we have a very active Slack channel. So there were many pieces already in place. I think just moving those to virtual and navigating that, process and communication and how that all works was a huge part of what we did. I think also then offering regular email updates on where our thoughts were from a company perspective. And I also I had been doing fairly regular lunch outings with different groups of employees. And I just moved those to virtual weekly coffee chats. So providing my availability on a regular cadence as well for questions that may not want to be asked in all company meetings or team meetings with managers. So those were some of the things that we did.
Got it. Lloyd and Mel, Comcast and SAP are large employers. And I know that communication already with large employers is probably already something you have to think about a lot. How did you change communication during this time when, normally you might be able to gather folks for an in-person meeting? How do you handle that during this time? I'll throw it to Lloyd first.
Yeah, look, thank you. So it's a great question, right? We globally, SAP has just over 100,000 employees worldwide, right? And so in some respects, we had a little bit of a benefit, I hate to call it that, but a little bit of foresight maybe in terms of seeing how this was impacting some of our operations in other parts of the world where the virus hit before it hit so intensely here in North America. So through that lens, we were really able to take a page from some of our other regions and, it really, I think, early think about things like restricting travel and shifting almost 100% to virtual, closing our offices, and then also, thinking through the lens of, just different people policies and really over communicating and making it clear to our folks that, health and wellness, comes first and foremost. We allow people to take crisis leave if needed, whether for to care themselves or anybody in family or networks that may have been impacted, by the virus. And we set up, certain task force and information sites and so forth, so that if people had questions or concerns that maybe they were afraid to go to their direct manager, they could, safely, pose them, get answers, and have a feedback loop maybe outside of the normal one that they enjoy day to day. And I guess the last thing I'll mention, and you kind of alluded to it earlier in the poll that you hit the audience here.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did early and we've continued to do is just continually pulse or survey our employee base to just make sure, how are you doing? Are you okay? What more could we be doing to better keep you in the know around what's going on, how we can better be helping you, and so forth. But just, I think Mel and Lindsay both alluded to it. We've never really been here before. So in the early going, we really erred on the side of over communication And then once it became clear that this was a motion we were going to be going through, that is, working remotely for quite some time, we kind of over time pivoted to just continually checking in. How are you doing? How do we need to evolve through this together? So, no, I don't know if any of that resonates with how Comcast.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, similar to Lloyd, we're about 100,000 in the cable part of the company, and we have colleagues obviously in Sky and NBC Universal. So we had a sense of what was coming through what they were experiencing. And actually I guess it was late February, early March, we started tabletop exercises at Comcast. So the 3 divisions, we actually played out scenarios for what would we do if this happens, what would we do if this happens? And then by our 3rd tabletop exercise, the virus had actually eclipsed us in Seattle. And what was kind of a fictitious planning session turned into a real-time, okay, here we are. And it really helped us get organized. I think the tabletop exercise of getting people's heads wrapped around the possibilities of all-out shutdowns in cities and regions and supply chain disruption really prepared us within days of experiencing the reality of that. And it helped us get organized. We have a pretty well-oiled communications machine, but we're so matrixed and we're organized functionally and geographically that for us, probably the challenge early on in the days that early days of COVID was just getting organized, getting all of our information together, bringing it to a set of leaders once a day, which we established a cadence of, so that we could make rapid fire decisions and then get that into the communications for the following day to get back out to leaders so they could start to operationalize some of the things that we needed to care for around our technician workforce, our care workforce, and our retail workforce. So that was kind of the early stages of what we did. And then we did everything Lloyd has already mentioned around leader meetings at various levels and, rapid engagement of our teams and deployment of work from home and the pulse surveys that Lloyd's been doing just to see how people are doing and care for them on the journey.
Yeah. Thanks. Jacob, before I throw it to you, I just want to say that someone in our chat wants to shout out your background, as do I. Can you tell us a little about that?
My background. Well, before I came to Baltimore to go do Catalyte, which, we're a company that's sort of about 700, developers now. I spent 16 years building a big offshoring company. So to some extent, like Lloyd here, I had a little bit of a sort of inkling of what was coming because even my old colleagues overseas in places like China and India and Taiwan and, Philippines were already experiencing, massive upheaval. So I think even here, we were sort of coming up with some plans, just some contingency plans that very quickly switched over to actual real operating plans. But I think, thankfully, Catalyte being an engineer, really a technology company, we were able to switch over to remote and switch over really pretty seamlessly. Even coming into the crisis, about 2/3 of our people were really working from home already. So switching over the rest of the company to remote actually has worked out pretty well. In terms of communication, I'd say that, we were a company that already every day was doing daily stand-ups across almost all of our engineers. So, being able to sort of communicate in a remote sort of live environment wasn't that big of an issue. But I do think that it was important also that, we did make a few changes, such as when we get on sort of these remote calls, we got to make sure they're video conferences, right? So I think there's something around sort of seeing people and being somewhat sort of present, even if it's virtually, makes a big difference versus just being a voice on a call. And clearly, I think for all of our leadership team, we've spent a lot more time just communicating and explaining why we have to make certain decisions. So kind of being able to be pretty authentic around sort of the decision-making process. I think so bringing people along throughout this crisis has been sort of, those have been some of the bigger changes that we've made in terms of how we communicate across the company.
Yeah, something I've heard from all of you, and I know we've experienced it technically, is just kind of this like theme of over communication. We might as well just keep talking because things are changing every single day. How did you strike that balance? I know we're about 2 months in now, so things you maybe have figured out, how much is too much communication, what's too little. Was there any trial and error there? Were there signs from your employees that like, hi, you don't have to check in every 30 minutes, that kind of stuff? Does anyone have any like anecdotes about how they've kind of figured that curve out?
Yeah, go ahead, Mel. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a great question, and I'm sure we're probably all going to have similarities in our answer. But in the early going, I would say we absolutely erred on the side of over communication and daily communications. And I think because for everybody it was just so scary, right, and so new, and we felt it was important that everybody heard the same set of messages in the same way from the same set of key people and so forth. But after a few weeks of that, to your point, and it became clear that we were going to be in this mode for a little while, and B, some of the anxieties, not all of it, some of it had settled down a little. I think we then pivoted to what can we be doing better to make sure that the overall employee experience is better, so that they can be better at what they do, and operating in this new tempo, whatever that might be for them, and by extension, help deliver the best customer experience. So as things have evolved, obviously in a company, no matter how small or large, you've got different constituencies, you've got different personalities and profiles, and you can't really drive a one-size-fits-all approach. And so as managers and as colleagues, you really have to be attuned with how it is you're feeling and how you're operating, and make sure that you're finding the right moments to kind of pull away or to focus on what's in front of you, and to be a bit more patient than perhaps in normal times, because you just don't know what other people might be going through. So as things have evolved, we've really tried to like a lot of companies, right, implement just other unique ways to kind of stay connected to people. We've really encouraged a lot of our people managers to maybe deprioritize some of the things that may normally be on your calendar that aren't absolutely urgent, and then fill that time with just more continual check-ins with your people, right? Either your direct reports or their directs, or more of your customers. And just in terms of customer contact, just to pulse with them. How are they doing? How are their teams doing? And nothing about what it is that we normally converse about, just to see how they're doing. So it's definitely evolved. And I would think, over time, we definitely pivoted from making sure that everybody hears a consistent drumbeat, because we're really worried about, everybody being healthy and safe, to what now can we do to make sure that we adjust to all the different experiences that people are having, and allow them the ability to still thrive, but do what they need to do in the context of whatever their situation is.
Yeah. Mel, it seemed like you had something in mind when I asked this question.
Yeah, so there were three things I think that helped us a lot with saturation and with disorganization. Part of it was we had to establish the single sources of truth around, where people had questions, where would they go? So one was our intranet site, obviously, so for the masses, we had links in there, and it took them right to the latest that we knew on COVID. But another, for people leaders that we established was an executive summary update that went out nightly. Every night, at 7 o'clock at night, for the latest on our protocols, to, any policy changes, to things we were doing to care for our customers differently that they might read about in the press. Everything went there. So they had easy access to it when they wanted it. And then we knew they were going to the source of truth. So that was one thing. Another thing that we did was we established kind of a hotline, if you will, within our HR shared services team, which is naturally kind of a call center in support of our employees. We designated folks that were on point to answer COVID-related questions. We were tracking those questions too, so that we really understood where people had topics that were of interest to them, where they were unclear, so that again, we could funnel a lot of those answers back into our sources of truth and have those documented. And then finally, we got into an early cadence of these are going to be planned meetings and planned calls. If you want to join, join. But people then could create in their schedule a sense of, rhythm and cadence. And now I think that we're deeper into this and we're all kind of moving back into a more normal, a new normal. We're sunsetting some of those, that were more frequent and really taking lead from what leadership is telling us they need so that we can get back into a better business rhythm.
Got it. So we had put up a poll at the beginning of this session that was kind of asking what your organizations, personally, everyone who's tuning in, about 200 of you at this point. So what are the tactics that you or your organization had taken to be more responsive in the time of COVID-19? A lot of people were responding saying that they were hearing a lot more from their CEO or their lead who, in charge of communication. Increased self-care and meditation, that kind of stuff, more staff surveying, which at least two of you have mentioned, and encourage PTO/company holidays, that kind of stuff. So maybe Lindsay, this is a good question for you. How are the people side of companies deciding, which of these kind of efforts to push forward? How do you decide, how do you, communicate about PTO and taking time off and all that kind of stuff, and mental health too, along with, trying to get your daily work done?
Yep. Well, similarly, I think, at the beginning, I felt that we were communicating a lot and very, very frequently. And I think we've moved towards, kind of spreading that out and moving from kind of 2-week plans to 2-month plans, which I think has helped. As far as, support, so knowing, our group is very close knit, 75 employees. So I think we naturally have a pretty good pulse between our managers, between, connection with me. Our CEO is very, very hands-on. So once we felt, everyone was in a pretty good place, and some employees have, traveled outside of DC, have gone to different areas to work, and just making sure everyone was okay. I think we really refocused our efforts in, professional development activities, wellness activities, where there is still a lot of connection and support and communication in just a, growth pathway, right? So we've had several book club events. We have weekly Clutch community support events that are essentially kind of passion projects for employees. We've had a cooking class, we had a kombucha brewing class, we're having a painting class this Friday. So we're doing them Friday afternoons. We had a podcast session last night, just assessing some different podcasts. So lots and lots of things going on, virtual dog walks, a lot of healthy activities that have been really positive, right? That we may not have done otherwise. As far as PTO, we have highly encouraged the use of PTO. So for this month of May, I actually just sent a note yesterday or the day before on Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are allowing all employees to take a day in May that will not count against their PTO. And we do have wellness Slack channels going. So there are lots of things that employees are sharing on meditation, yoga, virtual fitness classes, all those types of things. They have run groups and run clubs. It's a pretty active group of teammates. So it's all been really great. We're trying to make lemonade, right? Is what we say around the office in this situation. So a lot of healthy activity.
Thanks. Jacob, what are some of the things that you were doing in your leadership team are kind of addressing to address mental health, to address, connecting with each other, not just strictly on work terms, but just, to kind of be checking in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think generally the sort of the traditional tacit meetings that we used to have, one-on-ones and sort of review meetings, those have actually become shorter and more pointed and I'd say even more efficient. But exactly, I mean, what's missing is sort of that bumping around that typically happens, right? So how do you actually start to kind of get those sort of, vectors sort of pointed in the right direction? And so we've been doing a lot more virtual happy hours, doing a lot more sort of, even when we, one of the funnest meetings I've had, actually, I think one of the meetings that's improved is, for example, product planning, right? Product increment planning and things where, people now bring alcohol, right? And you just actually turn it into a little happy hour, and you actually get a lot even better ideas coming out of it. So I'd say that, again, it's different, right? So I think what's happening is like these meetings and things have shifted. And I'd say in general, I can't really say they're qualitatively better or worse, but they're different. One of the really interesting things, I mean, even outside of the company, I used to have this, like sort of monthly poker game in around Baltimore with other people, and that's all gone virtual. And I think the preference now is like everybody would rather just do it virtually going forward, even when we get back to normal times. There's something about playing online poker and then having a Zoom, next to you that sort of brings people together. And those games have gone from sort of 2.5 hours to like 6 hours now, during COVID.
Yeah. You mentioned, Jacob, virtual happy hours. We actually have a question from one of the attendees saying, in addition to meditation and virtual happy hours, what are other suggestions for bringing remote staff together for a social activity? I know, Lindsay, you mentioned virtual dog walks, which a couple of attendees seem to be really excited about. But are there other things, that you might do in your daily life that you're just kind of including employees in, or encouraging them to like go on a walk while we're on this call? You might as well get outside if you can, that kind of stuff. So.
We've definitely done that, right? A lot of directly, or I know other colleagues of mine, when they have a one-on-one or a small group meeting, and it's one of those things where there's no actual content to view, it's just all discussion oriented, especially with the weather getting nicer. People are saying, hey, you know what? Let's dial back in 2 minutes. Let's either walk our dog or just take a walk and do this as we're moving, right? And do it maybe, the video has been great to keep people connected, but sometimes people, just want to do it voice to voice, but allow each other to move around, even if there's background noise. So we've allowed for that. I think it's been really helpful. We've implemented a couple of things that frankly took off in ways I did not expect. Every Thursday morning, we do an 8:30 a.m. Boot camp. One of our colleagues has a fitness instructor. We Zoom with him in his empty studio, and we all follow along. People can either have their camera on or not. And when we first set it up, we thought maybe we'd have 15, 20 people, and we had over 100, right? And it's sustained that way. We have a lot of Peloton enthusiasts in our community. They're a client of ours. So we do a weekly Peloton ride here with my regional team. Recently, our colleagues out in the West have said, hey, let's make it a weekly challenge, right? And they're now doing like hashtags. And so you can kind of see how you're doing and make it kind of competitive. And another unique thing that I'll call out is one of our teams, our sub teams, everybody is using some of this time and with people not being on the road to amp up on enablement and education, right? And so some of our groups have actually done that in a really unique way where, obviously a lot of people are missing sports, and there was no March Madness this year. So one of our teams got really creative, and they basically created a bracket for teams to, perfect a presentation pitch. And each week, if you did well on how you scored, you progressed into the bracket, and then there was an eventual winner. And it got to the point where even teams outside of that group were coming to the Zoom sessions to see who would win and trash talk through the chats. And it was really just hundreds of people would join it, would bring people together. So I think one of the silver linings of this situation is that it's really shown how creative people can get to stay together. But I guess, so those are just a couple of extra ideas beyond some of the ones that were mentioned already.
Yeah. An actual question that just came through that I think is really pertinent to this conversation while we talk about communication is, which actual technology tools are you using to kind of communicate with your team? I know we're on Zoom right now. There's Google Hangouts, there's GChat, there's email, there's Slack. Are you feeling overwhelmed with the type of options that you have? Which ones have you found most useful? If anyone has a strong, Mel?
So we were dipping a toe in Microsoft Teams, and it just took off once we were all virtual. So for us, it's been a lifesaver, and that's been a platform that very quickly, from a change management perspective, we went from really no idea of how how to use Teams to 2 days you're an expert. So we've gotten really deep in Teams.
And we use Google Hangouts, Zoom, and Slack for the most part, I would say.
Were those already tools that you were using, or did you kind of have to spend a day and investigate which like virtual chat option would be the best for you?
Yes, we were definitely using Slack pretty heavily. I think it's gone up significantly since though, but not so much the Hangouts. I mean, we were very much an in-office culture, so the switch over to video and virtual was new.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say for us, I mean, the people who probably had the hardest time sort of getting onto these were actually the executives. We're a company mostly of engineers. So, already Slack, Zoom, all these, we were using all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And so, frankly, Slack has been one of those things that I've had to sort of get myself acclimated to. Yeah. I can speak for probably my CFO and some of my other executives of it's, there are new tools that we had to learn from our teams that were already pretty prevalent.
For sure. Part of being responsive during this pandemic is also recognizing that, your workers are workers, but they're also at home with their families. Maybe they have childcare, maybe they have, virtual schooling to be teaching as well. So how are you addressing that in company-wide communication, and how did you go about, making policies around that? What's kind of the attitude about people being at home and also having to work and having all the responsibilities of also maybe managing a household at the same time? Yeah, Mel?
So from a paid time off perspective, we actually have designated family care paid time off for use for caring for family, particularly, homeschooling, elder care issues. So kind of added to our suite of paid time off. The other piece that's really interesting that we're kind of embarking on now, showcasing people in different family situations, capturing what they're doing from a best practice perspective. So if you're single and you're feeling isolated and you're managing that somehow, we want to capture that to share with other employees that are in that same family situation, or you're managing an elderly parent who's anxious about what's going on, or how do you do homeschooling while you manage be on conference calls, what are your tips and tricks for setting that up? Mm-hmm. We want to put a spotlight on those employees so that we can post it on our virtual workplace and have fellow Comcast teammates be able to see their own juggle that. And it's kind of, we're all learning on that journey, but we know there are folks that are figuring that out, and we want to share that.
Yeah. One unique thing that we did, it might be an additive idea that hasn't been mentioned yet, is we actually, a lot of companies have a take your child to work day. Mm-hmm. So a week before last, we did a virtual one for our company. We opened it up globally, and we opened it up to our customers as well, right? And it lasted 3 hours, and there were different guest speakers that came on and so forth. And the uptick that we got from clients and partners and our employees was phenomenal, right? And we'll probably do it again. It used to be an annual event, but I think they maybe do something like that quarterly, depending on how long we stay in this motion. So I think that was maybe just a fun thing to think about. On the more serious side, something that we've tried to a little bit more focus on lately, and some of you may have seen this, it was covered in an Economist article just this past weekend. But if you think about different constituencies within your company, and particularly people that have just come into the organization, say within the last 6 to 12 months, whether they're experienced hires or whether they're early talent, new in their careers, you can tell just from the group on this panel, we've been in our organizations for a while. We have our own networks, and just given the nature of our business, while it's not always fun, we can sustain in this virtual mode because of the networks that we have established. But think of some of the people in your organization or in your teams that don't have that same luxury, and what are you doing to make sure that you're continually, probably over rotating on making sure that they are okay. Not doesn't always have to be you directly, but do you have some sort of plan to make sure that those particular employees are perhaps cared for a little bit more, and maybe communicated to a bit more often? because they probably need it, right? I would say in particular, younger employees who are just starting out in their careers. None of us really have the experience of operating through a pandemic. But many of us do have networks that made the shift to virtual probably easier than it has for some others. And so I think that's something that we could all probably think about and move upon in our day-to-day.
Yeah. Something that, while we're on the vein of this, how we're doing virtual work, have you all started to think about what work in an office will look like again, or when that might, be back in our radar? Jacob, you mentioned, that you have just a large team of engineers, so they're probably really used to working remotely, or at least like comfortable doing that. Is that something that you're considering? Oh, maybe we'll, just expand our work from home policy, or maybe the folks who are getting really used to it right now could continue that way, for a good while. So, how are you guys making decisions like that, and how are you communicating that with your teams about, what the future of work at your company is going to look like?
Yeah, well, we're just starting to roll out some of those policies in terms of what life looks like post COVID. And I'd say that, one of the kind of probably big decisions is, we are making sort of work from home remote basically the default for most of our sort of, at least for how we deliver our engineering projects. Clearly, in terms of training, talent, development, and sort of all the training cohorts that we run, well, those we probably are still going to have some kind of a hybrid. Mm-hmm. But going forward, yeah, I mean, remote is very much sort of going to become a default setting for a lot of how we engage with our clients, and also how our employees can work with us as well.
Was Catalyte already on that track, or did COVID-19 kind of present this opportunity to try it out and you guys just really liked it?
No, we really had a bifurcation around, frankly, proximity. So there was about 2/3 of our business was built to be a remote work from home, and about 1/3 of our business was essentially sort of run and delivered out of development centers that we spun up around the country. Yeah. But yeah, I think what's happened now is that, we're still going to continue to roll out development centers, but they're going to be very focused on training and employee development and career development. It's really going to be hubs around a community. But sort of the work that we deliver for our clients will probably kind of, again, default to remote.
Yeah.
And frankly, we've seen this from our clients. I mean, we have, some of our, our clients are mostly Fortune 1000 companies, and even some of the really big ones in, very traditional industries are also starting to tell us that they're adopting remote as the default going forward, at least for their technology and engineering operations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that that's a decision that, ultimately leadership starts to make. But Lindsay, as someone, as an expert in HR, I know that there's a lot that goes into kind of creating the policies around that eventually. Right now we're all remote because that's just how it has to be. But if there's decision making moving forward, I know that there has to be a lot of policies that go into, your employee handbook. So is that something that you've started to talk to employees and leadership about?
Yes. So it was really interesting timing, because I had been working on a work from home policy when this all kind of came about. And then I said, okay, I think we'll put this on ice to see what works, what doesn't, what will resonate best, and what we need out of this. So we've started to revisit that just, recently. And now that we have a more general idea of, like Jacob, I think that, our company will move to a lot more flexibility with longer term remote options, which really wasn't something we were talking about prior to all of this. But we've seen that it's worked quite well. A lot of efficiency, still a lot of collaboration, and just, we have very, very clear metrics for our teams. So, the productivity has been the same, or probably increased in some capacities. So yeah, I think there's a lot to sort through in just, thinking from a, physical space perspective and how that looks, and what, individuals will be comfortable with going forward, from, the distancing, and just also just the safety practices of how they, commute in and out of the office, and then what the office landscape looks like once we're there. So I think, we will take a phased approach, just as, DC is kind of doing, and this will be something we're working on over a period of time.
Got it.
So.
And one last thing that I wanted to mention, because we have about 7 minutes left, is transparency, because I think transparency is a large part about wrapped into communication, and that's essentially what we're talking about here. So I know we talked about over communicating kind of toward the beginning of this panel, but is there such thing as too much transparency along with this process? I know that it's uncertain times for the economy. It's probably uncertain times for workers in terms of just their personal futures. But I know there's concerns around a lot of, are people going to be laid off? Is pay going to be affected? How is our finances as a company? So how do you make the decision about how much to share with your employees, and how do you go about, kind of explaining those stances?
Well,
Go ahead,
Lloyd.
well, I guess yeah. So I don't think you can really be, you can't open your general ledger, right, for everybody to see. And so I think in terms of being transparent, I think the key really is that you have to be direct and honest with what you're doing, right? And again, why you're doing it and what could still change. Right? Our employees are obviously very, brilliant people, and they hold our feet to the fire, right? So, by being transparent, you get their buy-in. Right? And I think it's important that you tell them that, none of us has been through this before. Address the uncertainty up front, right? Is like, we've never been through this before. We're sort of making decisions, and again, explain why we're making certain decisions. And by the way, things may change, right? So let's be prepared for that. I think in general, though, when you're being transparent, I think it's really important that, I always tell people, you got to channel, as leaders, you have to be a mountain. Right? You got to be something, you got to be someone that says, hey, the change is coming, but the mountain's going to be here. Right. And I think it's really important that, that people understand that even if you have obstacles, even if change is coming, that there's a steady hand, backing people up through this crisis. In general, look, I say by being even more transparent and actually just telling people, hey, we don't know, right? We're doing the best that we can, and we don't know. You actually get a lot more buy-in, and you actually get a lot more people really stepping up. And, when we had to sort of, make certain sort of difficult decisions, if anything, we actually had employees coming back and thanking us and saying, at least this, everybody sort of had a sense of shared sacrifice and doing things to help each other out.
Yeah, look, and if I would just add, Paige, I agree completely with what Jacob said. And I would also, just to add, I think transparency it goes both ways, right? It's not just top down. I think it's really important that you open up, the dialogue and the mechanisms for your employees to be equally transparent back. About a year and a half ago, SAP acquired a company called Qualtrics, and it's an experience management platform, and it's to help companies, understand better their customer sentiments, their employee sentiment, how their brands are doing out in the market. One of the things that we've done just internally, and we've made it available to the market too for free, is these, remote work pulses, these return to work pulses. And, basically, when we pivoted away from just, daily communications and people wanted to know by the minute what was going on, to more how are people doing, this mechanism has allowed us to better understand and address the concerns and the unique needs of all the employees that we have, and allow us to build better actionable plans around, what our transitions need to look like, when people can return, and so forth. So, I think it's really helped us, right? If we didn't have some of those mechanisms and those feedback loop tools, we probably wouldn't be as responsive as we need to be to the variety of constituencies that we have.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jake and Lloyd. The points that I would add are, we've thought about this as just an ongoing change management process, right? So, bringing the team along, being as open as we can, explaining why, but also, starting to just think about it as a change management, right? It's been change management from a professional setting, from a lifestyle setting, and also remembering that in normal times, employees and teams really want to hear from leadership probably a lot more than you think they do. So always keeping that in mind, and especially, crisis type situations of, upping that a bit to to respond to those needs.
Yeah.
And I'll just round it out by saying, kind of an echo of what everybody else has said, we've been really honest about where we are as a company with the shift we've had to make. And we've been honest about some of those shifts may be permanent shifts. You know, the way we interact with our customers, I think, will change as a result of this. And so, you know, kind of laying a path for the protections we're putting in place for our employees and our customers, and setting a foundation that some of this may be our new normal going forward, and just being really clear about what that does to set the company up for success. We've been very honest about. So kind of articulating that we're on a journey. And much like 9/11, there were things that changed us forever. This will be one of those moments, I think, where we pivot as an organization in good ways, in maybe accelerated ways around digital capabilities that, you know, we've been able to accelerate 2 years worth of work within 8 weeks, that we won't go back on, and being able to share that and get employees excited, but set expectations around that too.
Got it. Well, thank you all for sharing. I think we have one last poll that's going out on this topic. Awesome. Yeah, so this is something we had kind of put out on our Twitter feeds. We're just curious about when you guys think we might be returning to in-office work, if that happens for you, if it happens in some sort of mixed capacity. So go ahead and take a minute. We have about 190 people watching right now, and just kind of tell us what month you think we might be returning to the office. But I want to thank all of our panelists for participating today. I really appreciate these open conversations about communication and transparency. So let's close this poll. What do you guys think about when you might expect folks to be going back to the office? We have like June, July, August, September, maybe never.
I think for SAP, it's going to depend on the part of the world that you're talking about. And I think it will be, we're fortunate in that we can do a lot of what we do virtually, but I do think we will see kind of a slow, gradual return, maybe starting like 10%, early summer, maybe 20 to 30% a month or two after that, and so forth. That's from an internal perspective. We work with clients all over the world in all different industries, and so our customer interactivity is going to vary based on practices displayed there. A lot of life sciences companies have told us already, don't expect to be coming on site for the next 12 to 18 months. In other industries, they want us to come next week. So it really does depend, and we have to be agile.
It seems like folks who answered the poll, September, 30%. The leading answer was September. Does that seem realistic to any of you?
I think we have no timeline. We're starting a planning process now. I think so much of what Lloyd says is true. We don't know, where we'll be from a state municipality perspective yet, even, from a building protocol perspective. So we're starting the process of understanding who needs to go back sooner. Mm-hmm. Just from an office optimal perspective, who can stay virtual indefinitely, and who might be virtual in a permanent situation. So just even getting that planning and sequencing completed will be informing to us, but we have a date.
Got it. Well, thank you guys so much for participating. I'd actually really love to introduce Anna Greenwald. She is the founder and CEO of On the Goga, and we're going to spend our 10-minute break doing a little mindfulness exercise. So thank you, Lindsay, Mel, Lloyd, and Jacob for joining us, and welcome, Anna.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here. Guys, that was an incredible conversation. I was lucky to be kind of waiting in the wings, listening to what you guys were talking about. And it's a lot of what we do here at On the Goga is everything you're talking about. We help our clients to really do a lot of the things you guys are saying. So I just want to give an extra kind of applause to all of you for what you're doing, because the work that HR and senior leadership is doing right now is incredibly hard. And I think it deserves a lot of acknowledgement. So especially when you're dealing, really whether you're dealing with 75 people or 750,000 people, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of coordination. So hats off to you guys for that. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. All right, so a little introduction. My name is Anna Greenwald. I'm the owner and founder of an organization called On the Goga. So we are an organizational well-being company, which means that we specialize in on-site when it's possible and remote well-being programs that help employees, leadership, and systems operate at their happiest and healthiest. And a big part of what we do is direct engagement and workshops with teams. So today, Chris and the Technically team have asked me to come here and do what is our first core value at On the Go-Go, which is practice your practice, and give all of you guys out there an opportunity for just 10 minutes of maybe some movement, a little bit of mindfulness, bringing our brains out of the computer of Zoom and into wherever it is that we are. So if you have 10 minutes and you want to hang out and move your body a little bit, trigger your opposite of your stress response, that's what we're gonna do for the next 10 minutes. So if you're able to stand up for a second, I think a lot of us have been sitting. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm going to put on some music. So if you guys out there can't hear me at all, just throw it in the chat because I got my eyeballs on that. So when you're ready, all I want you to do is take a second and stand up out of your chair if that's possible for you. If not, just sit in your chair tall in any way that makes you feel good. And the first thing we're gonna do is just reach our arms up overhead. Big breath in, and then shake it out. And then do that one more time. Inhale, reach up. And then exhale, shake it out. All right, whether you're sitting or standing, I want you to find just a symmetrical position in your body. So shoulders even, sitting evenly in your distribution of weight in your feet or on your bottom, and allow your eyes to close or take your gaze gently to the ground. And just take a few seconds to breathe in and out through your nose. Maybe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And just feel the sensation of air coming into your body and going back out. Now, I always like to say this isn't meditation magic. This is simply breathing deeply to send a signal to your brain that you're safe. That wherever you are, your body doesn't need to be tense. It doesn't need to be reactive. You're just sitting or standing. Take a full breath in through your nose. Open your mouth, let it go. All right, let's move some of the muscles that we maybe haven't moved yet today. So when you're ready, you're just gonna take your arms up overhead again. And then interlace your fingers and place your hands behind your head like you're lounging in a chair at the beach. Nice. All right, so with your feet planted firmly on the ground or seated in your chair, take a big breath in to lengthen your spine up. And then exhale, just look up, lean back a little bit. Keep your stomach drawing in, belly button to spine. Big breath in through your nose. Open mouth, exhale. One more big breath in here. Big breath out. And then on your next inhale, reach up overhead. And then shake it out. Okay, let's get into these neck muscles. Muscles that you're using all day, especially if you're at your computer. This motion puts a lot of tension on those muscles, so we're just gonna wake them up. You're gonna take your hand right underneath of your collarbone, either side. Then you're gonna take your opposite hand and you're gonna press into that hand and draw it down towards the ground. So you're pressing in and down. That's gonna anchor that muscle group right there. You're gonna look over your opposite shoulder and just take 5 really big breaths to nod your head. Deep breaths there. In through your nose, out through your nose or mouth. And all you're doing here is looking to create some sort of stretch, some sensation in your neck muscles. And what that's doing is it's sending a signal to your brain that it needs to pay attention to that part of your body and maybe relax those muscles, relax a little tension. Take 2 more big breaths here. Maybe the biggest breaths you've taken all day. 1 more big breath in through your nose. And then exhale, gently take your chin down to the center of your chest and shake your arms out, let your head come up. All right, other side. So hand right below your collarbone. So your collarbone's right here, your fingers come just below that. You're gonna press in and down, and then look over the opposite shoulder. This side's gonna feel different. So take 5 big breaths just to create sensation. Breathe. Maybe nod your head. Maybe you can even open and close your jaw. Notice what sensation that makes. Remembering that there's nothing you should or shouldn't be feeling here. One of my favorite phrases is, if you should too much, you'll should all over yourself and it's a big mess. That's not what this is for. It's just to explore what sensations or tension you might have in your body. One more big breath in. And a big breath out. Gently take your chin down, shake it out a little bit, shake your arms out a little bit. Okay, so if you have a chair by you or a table, this is the next exercise we're gonna do. You're gonna stand behind your chair so that your chair, you have the back of your chair right here. You can also use a table or a desk. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna stretch our thighs and our hamstrings. So you're gonna take one foot and step it forward, and then the other foot step it back. You want about 2 or 3 feet between your feet. You're gonna take a big breath in, and then on your exhale, you're just gonna walk your feet back, walk your arms forward, and take a little stretch through the backs of your legs. Now you can, if you feel comfortable, bring your elbows down to your chair. This will stretch your shoulders out wherever you are. Even if you're just standing, you can take one foot in front of the other and gently lean forward with a flat back. Take 3 breaths wherever you are. Maybe even notice what you're looking at. A lot of the times when we're on the computer all day, there's a disconnect between what we see out of our eyes and what we're thinking about. One more big breath in, big breath out. All right, slowly, gently stand up and just switch sides. So your other leg's coming forward, your opposite leg's going back. You can use that table or chair in front of you, or you can do this just with your hands on your hips, your hands on your thigh. Take a big breath in, and then slowly, gently hinge forward. Inhale, lengthen your spine. Exhale, tilt forward. Remember, if all you're doing right now is listening to this and breathing a little bit more deeply than you normally would, that's incredibly good for your brain and your body. So know that you are still practicing a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of yoga. One more big breath wherever you are. And then gently, gently come up, step it forward. Nice. All right, the next thing we're gonna do, because most of the day, especially when we're sitting on our computer, we're hunched forward like this. There's not a lot of rotation or movement. We're gonna take a gentle rotation. So if you have a wall, this is a really good tool. If you don't have a wall, you can do it with your hand up like this. But if you have a wall, go ahead and place your arm on the wall. You want your forearm to be up against the wall, so you're creating a 90-degree angle here. And then all you're gonna do is on your inhales, get a little taller. On your exhales, you're just going to tilt your feet and chest away from the wall. So if you have the wall there, you should be feeling a nice pulling sensation through your pectoral muscles, through your arm, through your chest. If you don't have the wall there, you can still pull your elbow back behind you and rotate your chest. Just 2 breaths like this. Inhale, exhale, twist. One more inhale, exhale, twist. Gently come back center, and you're just gonna switch sides. So if you have a wall, you can just simply turn around. If you don't have a wall, again, you can just keep your arm up like this. On your inhale, get a little taller. On your exhale, start to twist your feet. So your arms stay still. You're just rotating your feet and your torso the opposite direction. 3 breaths. Inhale to get a little taller. Exhale to open up. 2 more. One more, big breath in, big breath out, and then gently come back to center, shake it out. Okay, final chest relaxation here. Take your hands behind your back. Your elbows can be really, really bent here. They don't have to be straight. And then all you're gonna do is on your inhale, open your collarbones, spread your chest wide, shoulders come back. On your exhale, you can stay here, just getting a little taller. Or if it feels good, you can start to straighten your arms. Super straight arms here, not necessary. Whatever creates a stretch for you, do that for 3 big breaths. Inhale, exhale, maybe sigh it out your mouth. Inhale, exhale, one more big breath in. and out. And then release your arms, shake it out. All right, wherever you are, take a seat down in your chair. Relax your shoulder muscles away from your ears. Maybe allow your eyes to close. And then just start to pay attention to your breath one more time. Big deep breaths in through your nose and out through your nose or mouth. Notice the detail. Maybe the air is a little cooler coming in through your nose than it is going out. Maybe you're just a little bit more aware of the sensations inside of your skin. Your heartbeat, the weight of your arms. Take a final breath in through your nose. Open your mouth, let it go. And then gently open your eyes. It's nice to stay still for a couple seconds sometimes and just let the light come back into your eyes. So that's just a really simple little movement, stretching, mindfulness, which is just awareness of your body and where you are in space. Thank you guys so much. I'll be back for the panel on employer brand, but if you have any questions, my name is Anna from On the Goga, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much.